And good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We are live once again, and welcome to another edition of the Capture Cast. We are here today, and we're going to chat about the enrollment cliff. We're standing here at the base of the cliff now, and we pretty much have moved past the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're now in a place where we can begin to stabilize and grow our enrollments. Competition is going to get stiff. Your budgets aren't going to get any bigger. So what can we do to maximize our approach? We're going to go ahead today and give you some really helpful hints today, so that some of you can get ahead a little bit as we head into a yield season, and also starting looking forward to the next 2 or 3 years at the same time. As always, if you have any questions, please place those in the chat, and we'll try our best to get to them during our broadcast today. So let's go ahead and get started. For those who are new to CaptureCast, welcome. I am Chris Harris, the Senior Strategic Enrollment Specialist here at Capture Higher Ed, and we are super happy that you are here. A little bit about us. Capture Higher Ed is a leading enrollment marketing firm that believes that every interaction counts. Every email, every website, every digital ad, every text message you send has to be relevant and personal to the person that you're sending it to. Using higher education's only behavioral intelligence platform, we are the very best at identifying, converting, and enrolling the right students. Behavioral intelligence platform houses Engage, which is higher education's most complete and comprehensive marketing automation tool, which is backed with the industry's most accurate predictive models. Apply and enroll. With one platform, we provide marketing solutions that help students make it through that enrollment journey day by day on a personalized basis. And we back that up with our team of experts, who you're going to meet here in a little bit. We have enrollment experts, we have marketing mavens, and we have real data scientists on our team that manage everything every day. So as always, we start off today with our trivia question, or our poll question, I should say, for you, taking your pulse, making sure everybody's okay. So real quickly, it's the end of February, 175 calendar days left. How do you feel about your enrollment cycle right now? Are you ahead of schedule, but you're optimistic? We're on target so far. We're a little behind, but not concerned yet, or we're behind in all the areas and looking for some answers. I think we're going to see a mixture of things as they come in today. But I think one of the things that we're hearing out there is that things are starting to stabilize on most college campuses. Applications seem to be growing, campus visits seem to be growing. And then at the same time, they're looking for ways to increase their yield. I think that's the one thing that we've seen over the last couple of years, is that applications have started to rise again, but for some reason yield is lacking, or it's slacking behind. So we really need to work on that moving forward. So, as we looked at the poll itself here, we're just going to pull the end up here, and it looks like 30% we're behind in all areas. We're looking for some answers. So hopefully today we'll be able to help you out with some of those answers and make sure that you have some tips as you walk away, because I've got some really great folks here to help you get through that process. So today's agenda, let's go through it real quick. Current state of affairs. We're going to talk about what's happening in the enrollment world right now. We're going to meet the team that you're going to talk with today. I'm going to ask questions. They're going to give answers. And then hopefully later on, if you have a question, you can pose those questions, and the team's here to answer that for you. How do we leverage data to improve search and inquiry generation? So we're starting at the top of the funnel. As we know, the funnel is always moving, whether we're talking about this current year for fall 2023, or our sophomores and juniors that we've started talking to already. What do we do to leverage that to improve our search and inquiry generation? What do we look for? 4, how do we construct, deploy, and evaluate our multi-channel strategy? We all know that after COVID has hit, digital is here to stay. I've got some great statistics to show you today, but digital is here to stay. So if you have money that is lying around, which I know you don't, but if you're starting to look at your budgets for next year, you need to really be thinking about how you are leveraged in with your data and with your general digital spend. 5, how do we integrate data into the activities of your admissions counselors? We firmly believe at Capture that the admissions counseling staff is still a key to ensuring that you get to your enrollment goal. Remember, you're building relationships, and nobody builds better relationships than your admissions counselors. But it's no more of this giant shotgun approach. We have to be tactical with our admissions counselors, because we haven't been keeping them around. So we need to be able to leverage them, make them happy, make them win a lot. And we're going to talk a lot about that today as well. And then finally, we'll have some final thoughts and takeaways for you. as we go through it. So taking a look at where we are today, I think we've talked about this almost to ad nauseum, but while the number of students graduating from high school continues to fall, enrollment will begin to stabilize over the next couple of years. We've already started to see that in some areas of the United States. There are other things that you need to keep in mind. One is that the forecast of high school population shift that is happening as well. So on the left-hand side, it talks about the forecasted growth and decline in college-going students. We've seen this information from Dr. Graw at Carleton College. It's been all over the internet. I think everybody has used it several times in blogs, and it's a real thing. We started seeing that movement out of the Midwest, probably back starting in 2007, 2008. But you'll see there are pockets of places where growth is happening. So as you're starting to look like, and we're going to talk about finding new markets today, one of the things that you want to keep in mind is what this map really looks like and what kind of opportunities you might have. But the map on the right-hand side kind of shows the forecasted high school population shift too. So not only are we seeing that decline, but there's a shift. People are leaving the Northeast and the Midwest, and they're headed south and they're headed west, and the people out west are heading in toward the interior a little bit more. Last time we saw that movement was right around, I would say just post 9/11. We saw a lot of families in the Northeast leave and head toward the south. Where I'm in South Carolina. We've seen a growth of people moving to the area from all over the United States. It's beautiful and 80 degrees today here in South Carolina. So wherever you are, hopefully you're warm. Let's just say that for our friends in Minnesota and in the out west. But these statistics aren't going to change. Things are going to continue to move around. But we've seen these shifts have really contributed to the reduction of about 15% of the colleges and universities being open nationwide since 2004. So think about that. That was a stat we got from the State of Higher Education Executive Officers Association. So I think it's really a good idea that we start to understand Gen Z a little bit more so that we can get into some things. So let's talk a little bit about Gen Z. And it's interesting, and Sierra's going to pop in for me an article into the chat that we just read about an hour ago. And I'm looking over here on the screen just so I can read it to you. It's by Jake Perez, who's the editor at LinkedIn News, that students want brand name colleges. And here's some statistics that we got from Data Axle, which talks about generational shifts in marketing preferences, but no kidding. I think Jake's headline there is kind of a, okay, yeah, no kidding moment. But 96% of Gen Z feels loyal to the brand that they have affinity for that is built over time. You have to build affinity over time. It just doesn't happen overnight. And Gen Z is very, very aware of that over time. So make sure that you're building that. 84% of Gen Z will engage with marketing efforts from a brand that they are loyal to. So if you're building your brand over time and you get prospective students into your conflows earlier, it doesn't have to be that hard sell either. It could be just, come visit, or here's some scholarship opportunities, or, join us for a music performance, or come to a football game, those kinds of things. They will interact with those if they're brand loyal to you, right? So kind of keep that in mind as you're building out your conflows. Number one, social media is the preferred channel, while others still love their email. So they expect this, right? Gen Z, we know, are digital natives. I think that's really important to kind of remember that they expect for us to send them email. They expect to have electronic ads served to them through their social media channels, but they want to explore you through their social media channels and through your website still. So how you leverage that and how you communicate your institution's value statements through that is really, really important. And lastly, 81% expect a personalized experience when interacting with your digital assets. Now, I want to talk about personalization here for a second. Personalization is not, look at me into my eyes and know that I am serious. Personalization is not just doing a mail merge with putting a person's name in the heading. It's knowing and understanding what that student needs or what that student is exploring at the time that they are doing it, and then responding accordingly with messaging that has relevance to them at that time. We've talked about in marketing for the last couple of years, speed to relevance. Well, I'm not into speed of relevance because I believe that higher education marketing is different. We're talking about speed to relationship. How quickly can you get an important piece of information to a prospective student or their family We talked a lot. Remember our last talk, we talked about family communications with Laura Rudolph from Transylvania. It's important that you go beyond that. It's important that you just no longer put someone's name on a postcard, right? It is about the journey. You have to personalize that journey for them as you go through that. So, as I said earlier, digital is here to stay. So this chart here comes from our friends at Domo, who've been tracking the different channels that are being used since 2013, and literally the explosion of posts of content on these channels per minute. So just to give you an idea here, when you look at YouTube, back in 2013, per minute, there were 48 hours loaded up every minute. Today, it's over 500 hours of video content is being uploaded to YouTube per minute. Look over here at Facebook and Twitter. Let's check out Twitter for a second here. 100,000 tweets were shared per minute back in 2013. Now it's 347,000 tweets per minute. That's a huge explosion. But notice over here, emails, 204 million emails per minute were sent. Now we're at 231. So there's been a little bit of an increase, but not a huge increase. So, but think about it, take it to the next step. Think about what your emerging channels like TikTok and Reddit have. How many channels can you afford to be engaged in? How do you measure the success? So we're going to jump into that here a little bit today. And the evaluation piece is key. So when we talk about the evaluation method, I've been in the business. I served on a college campus for 25 years, mostly in the Midwest at small private colleges and universities. It used to be we would strategize, right? Remember April, May, June, we would do the strategy session. We'd figure out who we're going to go after. We'd plan our search out. We'd go out and recruit, do some marketing. Then we would measure it at the end of the year, and then we would count our deposits at the end. Well, because digital is here and Gen Z is now here, data is king. So that strategy session that we're talking about happens every month. We recruit and market every month. We measure all the time, every day, all day long. We can optimize what we're doing in the digital space. Remember, we used to send out 250,000 search pieces or view books. We'd have to wait for things to come back in. When we can look at our digital channel, we can measure it on a day-to-day basis and optimize at the right time and then measure it again. We can optimize again and measure again. The circle of life continues to move. So be thinking about that as you guys are moving forward, that this is a continual thing. We're not just talking about the class of 2023 right now. We're talking about 24, 25, and 26. We're talking about transfer students. We're talking about international students. We're talking about this whole thing now is a 24/7 animal in enrollment management. And that's the beauty of the art and science of it. And that's what gets us excited because we like to have that energy. And speaking of energy, I want to bring in our special guest for the Capture Cast today. These three have years of experience working on college campuses before joining our Capture team. So when I say that we are managed by experts who are, number one, awesome in their field, know their stuff, work with our clients every day, they understand that 175 days from now, you have to welcome a class. So let me introduce them and we'll get started. So first, she's the Vice President for Client Strategy here at Capture Higher Ed, where she oversees our day-to-day operations with and interactions with our partner institutions. Everyone, please welcome from Louisville, Kentucky, Lauren Gold.
Hi, everybody.
I sound like a basketball announcer. I did that in college for a little bit too. Next, she's the Client Trainer for Capture Higher Ed. What is that, you might ask? Well, unlike other higher ed tech companies, Capture not only has personal training for your team, but ongoing education of the behavioral intelligence platform and all the awesome enhancements we have every year. She is also the co-host of the annual Capture Client Summit. Everyone, welcome from Michigan. I won't say it too loud, Michigan. Kat Hollins. Hi, Kat.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here.
Right. And finally, she's the Director of Digital Marketing, and she and her team work to ensure that the digital marketing strategies for our partner institutions are developed and optimized using the latest data collection, graphic design, and implementation. Welcome from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. What? She's not on the beach, but she's on her way after this. Everybody, welcome Tabitha Bauer to the Capture Cast. Tabitha, good to see you.
Good to see you. Happy afternoon.
Yeah. So we won't get into things that fly over you today. That's for a different conversation later on. So as we get started, so I can remember back 26 long years ago when I was in my second year of being an admissions counselor, and our dean asked me to take on the purchasing of search names for our college. I had no idea what I was doing beyond the fact that I had to fill out all this paperwork and fax it in. We would literally rinse and repeat and maybe make a few adjustments, but there's never been a time where we could use a regression analysis to find zip codes or for high school visits. If we were going to try something new, then we were just spending money on a long shot with no real plan behind spending or sending a direct mail piece, invites to open houses, and an application, and having our telecounseling team make a phone call. That's how old I am, guys. That's actually, when I first started, I will be honest with you, I used to get green bar reports on my desk. I didn't even know how to use the computer when I first got one. So yeah, that's how old I am. Now let's move ahead, and through the use of really sophisticated behavioral platforms like the behavioral intelligence platform that measures every interaction that you can have, you'll see that the complexity is really not that tough to understand and utilize, but you just have to have the tool. So Lauren, when we talk a little bit about search, search has really evolved, and it's interesting as you get through that piece, that construction of the search campaign has evolved over the years. The process has to take into account past search and what you're looking for now and what could happen in the future. Predictive analytics, I know everybody kind of out there is kind of apprehensive about the phrase predictive modeling now, that kind of thing. But when you and your team are looking to help a partner institution with search, what is that process for creating that comprehensive search strategy? And how do you guys go about implementing that?
No, I think one of the first things that we have to do is we have to have the conversation of what does search mean to your campus and what are your hopes and dreams and goals of these search campaigns? Because for some campuses, maybe search is it, and search is where the bulk of their applications come from. And for others, it's growth, and they're looking for a way to expand into new territories. So a big portion of our process at Capture is having that conversation up front to determine what we're going to do and how it's going to impact everything else. From there, we have to look back, right? We have to look at the historical data to see what has converted, what's happening there, and make assessments of test score ranges. Do they still matter? Do they not? Territory alignment, and are we still traveling there? Is this still a valuable source? But we also have to look forward too. And we have to look ahead to strategic plans of the university for the next several years. Because one of the biggest things about search is it's not a senior strategy anymore. It is a all throughout the high school time period for a student record process. So we have to know and plan ahead for what life is going to be like 3+ years for now on the college campus to be able to construct the right search buys for that campus. That includes, are we going to run parent campaigns in 2 years, but we're not ready yet? Are we going to launch new programs, new sports? All of those components have to play in. Once we have those conversations and we feel like we have the plan for the campus outlined, we've looked at the historical data, then we're going to build out and look at our market segmentation. And what market specifically? Maybe that's a territory, maybe it's specific states, maybe it's an honors program, maybe it's a specific demographic of students. And each individual demographic or market segment requires a little bit different of a strategy. So it's not a one and done kind of situation, Chris, like it used to be for sure. We have multiple buys per day that may go in for one territory, depending on what we're looking for there. We also have to assess where we're buying names from and when we're buying those names. There's a lot of sources out there. Some have overlap with others. So we have to make that decision on a case-by-case basis for what has converted in the past, what we're seeing convert well for other similar institutions. And sometimes we have to do some A/B testing and some trials too. The great thing about our search process is it's ongoing and it's constantly assessed. So we buy one time, we look at it, we see how things are going. If it's not working, we make the adjustments as necessary. And then last, obviously, we have our predictive model, which we refer to as SearchR, and that gives us the ability to really hone in on specific zip codes that are going to have the best chance for leading to applications for our clients. So we utilize that not only to purchase names, but also to identify growth markets for a client and help them see where, if we have the budget to grow, we should go next.
I think that's interesting that you say that, and Tabitha, I'm gonna ask you a question here in a second, but Lauren, the test optional stuff has happened, and students weren't testing obviously because of COVID, and it's kind of jumped back up a little bit, but to your point, there are so many different ways students are entering now into these search buys and things like that. I think, to your point, the search optimization piece of buying, measuring, optimizing, and then buying again, those kinds of things has really helped. Because I remember, we're going to buy, 100,000 names, and I would literally buy as soon as someone would take the test, we would send in the purchase order, right? And we would get it back three or 4 weeks later on floppy disks. Again, that's how old I am. And we would have to load them into the computer. And it was just like, if we wanted to do, we would do like an honors program thing, or, we were looking for a specific major or something like that. We might segment a little bit, but it was so difficult to do that. And now, because everything's electronic, it does help that. So Tabitha, let me ask you a question. Since now that we can use these digital means to reach prospective students and their families, how do you and your team use search to find those pockets of students to serve them digitally as well?
Yeah, of course. So using what we've learned from search gives us really unique opportunities to increase the impact of our digital advertising. So now, knowing what geographic data we have, we know where our strongest applicant pools are. This means that we can really intentionally serve ads to those geographic areas, because targeted efforts drive much better results than wide nets. And we'll dive into that a little bit deeper when we get further in.
Nice. Now, Kat, let's take a look at it from the counselor's perspective, because I think that's a huge thing too. We talk about travel right now. Spring travel is happening all over the United States. There's spring college fairs. Counselors are out there. Typically, we would just use application and enrollment data to find those hot areas. But how can we leverage that data from the platform to possibly send some counselors into new territories then?
There's a lot of great data that's within the platform that can be used, whether you're just running reports and seeing zip codes that seem to be converting really well, or for your counselor side of things, we have our apply model, which is taking all of that historical data, and much like Lauren was saying with Searcher, using our own predictive modeling to say, hey, this is who has really converted in the past, and then serving that like that map that you have right there to say, here's where we're seeing some really hot places. And then we serve that up to our counselors right in the platform to say, hey, if you were already headed over there, are there any schools that look like they could also be really helpful? Or you're already going to a conference and it just so happens there's 3 schools that could really help you branch out over there. And you're able to say with data that it looks like that's a really good place to visit. So it's very helpful on both sides.
And I would say that I've actually used that personally when I was the director of admissions at a university in Ohio. We used our applied model data and some of our search data too, to really define some areas in Chicago where we would go. And I actually took 5 counselors, put them in a van, and sent them to Chicago for a week. And they kind of got to Chicago and then got their own cars and spread out all over the place. And they literally just, we called it a carpet bomb. But they just went into Chicago and just really did a nice job of meeting with students that we knew that were and at schools that we thought that were going to be really good matches for us. And we ended up getting a really substantial number of students out of Chicago for the next 3 or 4 years because we started doing that. So that's a thing that you guys can really think about too, is how do you, if it's farther away from your normal primary or secondary recruitment area, how can you put feet on the ground as well, whether it's through alumni help or just sending your counselors out there too. It's always an adventure to send the counselors out way far. So we know that students are on a journey to enroll at your institution. While we like to think that's because there's an enrollment funnel, I'd like to think of it, the process is more linear now as the approach, because students are utilizing so many different channels as you walk through this. One key that we remind everyone every day is that these digital strategies, we must be multi-channel when we're doing things, whether we're doing it serving email through the phone, or we're serving a digital ad, or we're placing digital advertising someplace. The ability not only to purchase the right names, but to identify those students and their needs as they interact with your digital assets is so very important. So remember, personalization is expected. I think I made my point earlier. I'm not going to get on my soapbox again about that. I think that's one thing that we do a really nice job of, is making sure that multi-channel approach. So Lauren, when we look at the landscape now, and there are so many channels that are that we can be interacting with prospective students and their families and students, students can be really engaged 1 minute and then go radio silent in one channel, but then they're found again over here someplace, they just pop up all over the place. It's 2:00 in the morning, that kind of thing. How important is it for today's enrollment leaders, people who are sitting in these chairs, watching us right now, these enrollment leaders, to have that pulse on what is working and what is not working when maximizing their search? Because search is now the multi-year, all year kind of entity. It's a living, breathing thing now in my world.
Yeah. And I think obviously it's very important to be assessing and have your thumb on the pulse of what's going on. I think the big piece of it is you cannot look at these individual components siloed, because some pieces work for some students and not others. The question is always, do we send enough emails? Should we not send email? Is email still working? Well, yeah, it does, but it doesn't work for everybody. I don't answer emails, but other people do. And so I should say I answer emails. Not my spam though.
Right.
But when we look at digital ads hit at a different time. They hit at the right time for the right student, and they can really have an impact. So not only is it, we need to look and assess, we need to look at how they're playing together. We need to identify those patterns and how they're playing together and make sure we have the right overlap within our strategies so that they can play off of each other. Can't send an email and then send digital later on. They have to play off of each other so the brand recognition builds over time. Similarly, you have to plan and think through, what is the success of this campaign? A sophomore campaign is not going to drive applications. It's may not even drive inquiries, but it may help with brand awareness so that down the line you do have more inquiries. So you have to think about it with different lenses on with each group, but absolutely important to be assessing and also pivoting whenever something isn't working.
I think that's interesting you say that about the sophomores and juniors, because they're not driving to application just yet. It's almost like putting the billboard up back in the old days, right? We'd put the billboard up and we would just kind of look at it and go, is it doing anything for us? Do we know? Or we send out the postcard. Is it doing anything? Or do we see things on the website? So when we don't see things on that, now we can see things on the website. So when we look at the identification and its importance, one thing to keep in mind is that the earlier stats told us about Gen Z. They like to have brand loyalty. And I think Lauren, again, just mentioned affinity again. However, it will take some time to build that brand affinity with these folks. So the importance of identification, building that brand affinity for your institution, identify those stealthy inquiries and applications. We are still dealing with stealth. Folks, we've been dealing with stealth since we launched the first. I remember when Ohio University launched their online application, and they were just going crazy down there going, I don't understand, where do all these students come from? Because we didn't know who they were. They weren't in our search and they weren't in our inquiry pool. But identifying those stealth inquiries and applications early is better. Implementing personalized communication flows based upon student behavior and not just application status. It's not just about, have I applied? Have I been accepted? It's like, where have I visited on your website? Those kinds of personalization kinds of things. So Lauren, the biggest one for me here is looking at this list is the ability to identify those stealthy prospective students who are on the website all hours of the day. We know that transfer students are on the websites, later in the day, overnight kind of situation, whereas families usually are in the afternoon and parents are on at night. As someone who works with our clients to develop communication patterns with the use of such items as email, dynamic content, and some of our digital retargeting, how much an advantage do our partner institutions have because of their ability to identify more students earlier in the enrollment process?
I mean, it's absolutely a huge advantage to know who's on your site and what they're doing, right? And to also be able to customize your outreach directly to what is important to them. It's the benefit of the dynamic content on the website to hit them at that 2:00 visit with information about how to transfer to your school. When we know an admissions counselor is not going to be sitting at their phone waiting to have that conversation at 2 a.m. I mean, some might be, but I don't.
When you and I were bosses, we made our counselors do that. We did. I know you did.
But I mean, it's a very powerful tool, right? It's something that's untapped by many institutions, and it's a way for you to see not only to help this class and to help that specific student to make their journey, but it really provides you that marketing insight to look back on at the end of the year to say, what worked, what didn't, how were my inquiries playing with our website? Where were they and what were they doing? So that you can make informed decisions about content creation and about website changes. There's just so much to it once you know who they are and what they're doing that can help in all aspects of the recruitment cycle.
Yeah, I think having all of that information can be really dangerous to the right people if they have a really good digital marketing team who can create different things on the fly and look at the website and say why are all these students on the careers page? I don't understand that piece, and maybe we need to put something out there about career planning and placement, those kinds of things. So I think that's an important build. So when we talk about channel experience, and thank you, Lauren, for your insights on search and identification. When we switch modes here, we're talking about building that multi-channel experience. We use behavioral data to determine geographic platform and ad placement. I think that's a big thing. Make informed placement decisions by understanding your audiences. We've kind of touched upon that. We need to harness the power of list-based digital targeting. We're going to talk about that here in a second. And thirdly, if it pops, there it goes. Prospect for new suspects with lookalike audiences. I think that's one thing that we really haven't gotten to as a group. We're doing it very well, but overall, we're seeing in the marketplace right now that there is not a lot of looking toward the future. What does it look like? Those kinds of things. So there are several segments out there, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But the biggest one that is out there is location. So marketing folks always say it's about location, location, location. So when it comes to search, Tabitha, how can location play a role in how we do our search and then obviously our outreach from there?
Yeah, of course. So the big thing to think about with search, and especially with search R, is that it allows our digital marketing efforts to be targeted and specific. So rather than serving Google ads, social media ads, and list-based ads to large geographic areas and then trying to hone in and see what worked best, we're able to really use those zip codes and drill down to only those specific areas where we see very high applicant pools, meaning higher quality leads from digital advertising, which is really important. It's really more quality than quantity. We know that in our efforts. And then when we flip it and kind of bring it around full circle, using what we learned in our digital advertising to then go ahead and predict a little bit about how we can inform our list buys. So we can then take all of our analytics, flip them through and say, where did these actually work well? And where did we get the best leads from these digital ads?
You're talking about big bang for your buck. We're going to talk about that here at the end, but I think purchasing, I think everybody's really scared about purchasing digital because they've always been in that blanket kind of situation where it's, oh, we got to do all of Hawaii, in that area, when you don't have to. You can literally go zip code +4 to do that. You can hit somebody's house if you want to. That's called geo-targeting. I'm learning, see? But there are several segments out there, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But the biggest one out there, we talked about location. There we go. How are you using those Google Analytics to move through that process a little bit? Let's move over here to the targeting one. There we go. We've always spoken about segmentation of markets, right? So, and Lauren touched upon it a little bit too. It's honors program. It's a location. It's a this, it's a that kind of thing, really getting that microscopic so that you can be personalized, right? I mean, that's what it kind of comes down to. But how do we leverage all of that information into our digital strategy and our digital targeting? Because it can get messy. I think that's the best word I can use, is it can get messy if you don't have the platform and if you don't have a plan in place.
Yeah, for sure. As you were saying, those predictive analytics really tell us who on your lists are most likely to engage with your university and are more likely to take the next step, whether that's to inquire, apply, deposit, etc. So understanding, number one, where a prospect student is in their journey, and number two, how engaged they are, allows us to serve highly relevant segmented ads. And then again, target those whose data tells us are most likely to become applicants and make the most out of our digital budgets. Again, talking about getting really nervous to throw money into that digital spend, really knowing that we're utilizing our digital markets to the best of our ability and drive those high quality inquiries.
So what I'm hearing you say is this: it's not enough to have the predictive piece. It's not enough to just buy. You have to measure the behavior of that student at that time so that you're providing the right message at the right time. Speed to relationship, right? That's what we're talking about. And I think that's the one thing that a lot of people are missing in this whole process, is that there's a full circle here that everybody has to get through. So now this is going to be even more important than ever moving forward, finding new audiences, Tabitha. And I think one of the things we're looking for is we're going to look into expanding into new markets. How do we go about looking at, from a digital ad perspective or a digital spend perspective, when you have to constantly review all that information, and you're talking about, could be hundreds of thousands of names. I mean, there's still colleges and universities out there, they're going to buy a million names. I can name a couple off the top of my head who are going to buy everybody, that kind of thing. But how do you break that down to find those specific audiences so that your spend is a little bit better?
Yeah, of course. As you were talking about before, no one wants to see the same irrelevant ads over and over and over. So on our side of things, that's really looking into optimizations, serving fresh and relevant content, and really continually growing and updating the audiences that we serve in digital ads. Those are really the big key factors in making sure that doesn't happen. So one key thing to do here is to grow your data into lookalike audiences. So we already have this rich data. We can tell who is most likely to engage, who is most engaged, and then we can do that to build really intentional lookalike audiences and grow the lists of people that we're able to market to. So that way we're getting those fresh eyes on our content and getting in front of new people and really prospecting. And then the second thing there is really just making sure that we're segmenting our lists. We know who is most likely to engage, and then we can update those lists constantly to make sure that we're reaching the student where they are in their journey when they're most likely to take an action. It's all about using what we know to serve relevant content to the right student at the right time.
Yeah, I think again, building that relationship in a digital world has come full circle, because again, it used to be we would just blindly send out 500,000 pieces of mail, and then we would just pray that the phone rings or someone would send us an email or something like that. And it's kind of cool. So thanks, Tabitha. When we talk about measuring things, and this is just kind of a little bit of a comparison of what we've done here on the behavioral intelligence platform. I'm kind of showing you some stuff behind the scenes, but when you're measuring things, it's not just about open rates and click rates and things like that. It's, are you able to identify who these people are as they're going through that? And the optimizations, I think one of the things that you can show here is a little bit of, there's some optimization line there, and how you go about presenting that information out there. To tap at this point, making sure that your digital spend is being done the right way. So as we transfer out of that, we're going to talk about leveraging your data a little bit. And what I like to say, that data is king. It's not. There's an art and science to enrollment management. This is the science of data, how it's collected, and how you take that data and you enthuse and make it infused into your talent on a day-to-day basis. But you need to know where your audience is and select those channels. Again, you got to match those family needs with your channels, because guess what? You should be managing parent communication as well, or guardian information, family information as well. What are your competitors doing? Do you know what your competitors are doing? Are you monitoring what's happening there? Set your goals for each channel too, because you can't be in every channel all the time unless you have a huge budget. And if you have a huge budget, Lauren would like to talk to you about that. And collect data and use it to refine your strategy. The strategy has always got to be living and breathing. A strategic enrollment plan is just that. It's a strategic plan, which means you are measuring it all the time to get moving forward. So let's switch gears. And Kat, this notion of talent and keeping your counselors focused on the right students with the right message is what we're going to next. We all know that admission counselors are our most precious resource. As being a former admissions counselor myself, I know that's the hardest position in the admissions office right now to retain. If you go out to higheredjobs.com or you go out there and look for Indeed, there are admissions counselors jobs all over the United States. Actually, there's about 2,500 enrollment management positions open nationwide right now. And that says a lot about our succession planning, and I will get on the soapbox about that at another time. So Kat, can you walk us through how Engage, our platform, helps capture that data and provide it in an easy way? Daily report, funny enough, we call it the daily visitor report.
Absolutely. So we're hearing all these ways that we're identifying all these people. So now it brings us to that whole, okay, we've got this huge bucket. Who is the most relevant person to make that relationship with? So to serve it outward to our admissions counselor starts with the daily visitor report. So you can see here that it says 8 identified visitors and the amount of anonymous visitors. So we actually segment this out by counselor. So I would receive this in the morning and it would let me know that 8 of my students in the CRM had been on the my website in the last 8 days, or 8 of them had been on the website yesterday. So this really lets them know, who should I reach out to today? You start your day and you say, these 8 students were already thinking about me. This is the time to reach out and let them know someone is here on the other side to help them make that next step. So the daily visitor report, it just really lets you plan out that day and have an idea of who's the best person to reach out to right now.
Or if they're a good counselor, they're up at 2 o'clock in the morning managing that, right? That's how that
Yeah,
works.
they were already on it. They knew before
Right.
the email
Right,
came in.
Lauren, that's how we work that. That's what we do. We make that happen, right? So Kat, you bring up a really good point. Okay, so as we dive into the data, one thing that we have to keep in mind is that all of the data is at record level per student, right? And we have our visitor profile of Bob Sirku here, which is kind of interesting. But I want you to really talk about, because we kind of touched upon earlier. You just said something about engagement within the last 7 days, but the CAI score is overall engagement since identification, which means what? We're building I'm hitting my mic. We're building affinity, right? That's what we're doing. Can you break down for us what admissions counselors should be seeing from their prospects and how they can build speed to relationship with prospective students based upon these types of interactions?
Absolutely. So aside from the daily visitor report that's telling you who was there yesterday, when you enter a visitor profile, so we've got Bob here, this is telling me the story of his engagement right now. So what I'm seeing here is you've got the CES, that's engagement, that's momentum on the site right now. And then you've got that CAI score. So that brand affinity for coming to your website repeatedly since we've identified them, and that's going to build up. So now I can see that Bob's kind of middle of the road, kind of new to checking out this institution. And then we've also got that decile score. So that's, again, for our apply model partners, we take all of that historical data and say, this is a typical student that's going to come to my school. And we bucket them out from 1 to 10, 9 being someone very likely to apply to your institution. We can see Bob is an applicant in this case, but it really lets you know momentum, brand affinity, and how likely they are to apply. And then you can even dig in deeper and you see those top tags. And these are all pieces that we can push into your CRM. So it is available everywhere. So the top tags are going to tell me, all right, I'm ready to reach out to Bob. We're kind of on the fence, but he's very like an applicant here. I'm going to talk to him either about the admissions process. Looks like he was on that academics page. So maybe I want to talk about how you can choose your program of interest. And then student life. Let's talk about the culture of campus. Is this a good fit for you? Let me invite you to a visit. So really bringing those pieces together to say, okay, I know a little bit about Bob. I want to connect with Bob. So it really helps kind of make that connection.
And really, if you know anything about Bob, that's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
I love you, Bob.
Bob.
Bob's in New York and he's covered in snow. But I think that's important, because you just talked a little bit about where that prospective student has been, where are they visiting now, those kinds of things. And this kind of gives you some information about where they visited on the website so that you can prepare, whether it's a phone call or an email or a handwritten note or something like that, something personalized from the counselor to do that. So kind of walk us through this desktop or mobile piece here.
Yeah, so this piece is something that is right in Engage. This is obviously a lot of information to be pushed around. So this would be when I would want to come into Engage. And this is going to show you where Bob was actually clicking, click by click, what he was going on. So the last time you saw him on the web, you know exactly what was forefront of his brain. So as we can see here, he's looking at that virtual open house. Maybe I want to, invite him to that. But even beyond that, I really like to dig into the device and the time. So I know that Bob is on his desktop computer and he seems to be thinking about my institution in the morning hours. So it might be a really good time that if I were going to reach out to Bob, he looks like a morning person. Maybe that's when I'm going to shoot that email or give that phone call, because that's when it seems to be best time for him.
Right. I think that's important to keep in mind too, is that device piece too. So if they're on the home computer, who actually is looking, kind of situation, right? So it could be mom, it could be the whole family doing it, depending upon the time of day, right? So I think that's an important piece of that. And then Kat, one more thing is talking about the journey. So as we interact as people who are marketing, enrollment marketing people are pushing out that application, or they're doing different things. Talk us a little bit through how we use this particular report and the journey that they're taking right now?
So I love the visitor journey because it already tells me what work has been done. Because what you're seeing here on the right hand of the screen, these are all captures marketing pieces that had popped up on the web page as Bob was searching around. And then you see those are all little blue dots. That's marketing content served. And then that dot turns purple. So that tells me that out of all this stuff that Bob has potentially seen or be sent, he finally opened an email. So you can actually click that link and the email would populate and I could read it. And I would know that if I'm going to reach out to Bob again, he already knew A, B, and C, and I'm not going to waste my time with that again. It's going to sound very generic to him. So I know he has A, B, and C. Now I know where I can take him to D, E, F, or take something out of that email and run with it because that's where his interests lied. He opened it.
I think that's part of the nudging process, right? So identifying where they are, what the next step is, and going, hey, why don't you pay your deposit or, fill out your housing application, those kinds of things. So cool.
Especially when people are clicking on, finish your application and they haven't.
Exactly. Thanks, Kat. I appreciate that. So kind of when we look at it, you need to build it, measure it, and execute it. So we've talked about today about gathering that student data from your search sources and people raising their hand, that kind of thing. And then you're serving them your digital strategies, whether that's triggered email, whether it's behavioral email series, whether it's dynamic content on your website, whether it's a phone call, those kinds of things. Those types of strategies are served, but then you're measuring that student behavior. That's where your data is really being collected and scored so that you can do one of three things. One, you can change your marketing spend. You can reduce your marketing spend, you can focus your marketing spend, or you can move money around in your marketing spend. That's a big deal right there. That saves you time and it saves you precious resources that you might not have. Data-informed counselor outreach. We just talked about that with Kat. As an admissions counselor, if I know what's happening in that student within the last 24 hours, 48 hours, and what my relationship or our relationship has been with that student for the last 2 years, then I know and understand what my approach is going to be, that I need to get that student to campus, or I need to get that student through that next application process, or whatever that might be. But giving your counselors the tools to be awesome is the most important thing that you can do for them. Giving them a list of 500 kids to call is a waste of time, and it's not going to go well for you. Admissions counselors do not want to do that. You might get some telecounseling students to do that, but I didn't even want to do that 26 years ago when I started. I did it because my boss made me, but we didn't have this kind of data in front of us. And then also print. People are still doing print. Okay, I just wrote a couple RFPs this week. People are still asking for print, but you don't have to send out 500,000 direct mail pieces. You can pick who and choose based upon the data science that you have in front of you, where you're going to get the most interaction from, or you can pull out segments and say, we're going to send this specific data piece to these folks as you're doing that. So again, using the data to make sure that you are doing some great things. Thursday's takeaways: build your search strategy and communication plan early in the process, early and often. I wrote this down. I've got it posted up over here over my computer monitor right now. It's win early and win often. Okay, your search strategy will help set you up to win, but you have to have data behind it, or you're not going to be very good in the end. 2, launch that multi-channel experience. You might not be into digital just yet, or you might be just dabbling in some places, but go ahead and dabble because it's here to stay. You're going to have to build that over time, and you're going to have to figure out where your students are interacting in those digital channels so that you can spend more money in those areas and take some money away from others. But always be on the lookout for new ways to interact with your students. TikTok came along within the last 18, 24, 36 months, and it's blown up, and the students are using that as influencers and things like that on the college side. So make sure that you're listening to what your current students are saying about what's going on in the marketplace. And 3rd, help your counselors succeed. I get on my soapbox about counselors because I, again, was once one a long time ago. You have to leverage the data so they don't waste their time. Don't waste their precious time. Let them make contact with those who are more likely to enroll or in segmented areas that you want to grow in so that they can grow those relationships. I think that is a perfect way to go. Ladies, thank you so very much for taking this Thursday afternoon with me. It was great to see you all. Stay warm, stay safe, and we will see you guys very soon. Thanks very much. And everybody at home, thank you so much for joining us today on the Capture Cast for February. We'll be back in March with a new one, and we hope to see you then. Take great care.